Welcome to the GTP. My name is Scott, where we talk all things manga, and I'm excited to share with you a different type of video, and that's going to be some first impressions. My latest manga haul, I actually received 10 volume 1 manga releases, and I thought it might be worth it to go ahead and discuss it in a separate video than my normal long manga haul, as that one's going to probably have about 80 volumes, and instead of having to sift through all that, I thought, hey, let's try something a little different. So I'm going to share with you 10 new releases and give you just some of my honest first impressions on what I think about each one. Let's go ahead and get started. In the comments below, I'd love to know from you, which of these 10 manga volumes do you think are most worth checking out? The first series we're going to check out is actually a webtoon comic, and from my understanding is one of the most popular in webtoon, and that is The Gods of High School. Now, this is a story about this main character here. He's a Taekwondo specialist that when they rank him, he's not that strong, but if he gets a burst of energy, all of a sudden he seems and appears to be more powerful than anybody else around. Now, this story is about with this main character and many others who are given this card, this invitation. They're the strongest fighters in the world, have been invited into this, let's say a high school tournament, to see who is the best and may be able to attend this elite school, from my understanding. But to be honest with you, it left me wanting a little more. I was actually surprised that this is extremely popular. I hope maybe the volume 1 is just a little slow, but I just thought it was okay. Now, there are other series I think that do a better job, as when they're fighting different opponents, they show you a little bit of that person's backstory, of why maybe they're a bad person, why they're mean, and there's stories such as The Boxer, which I think does such a better job when you're fighting a different opponent to find out a little bit more of their backstory, gives you more sympathy for them, and that just might be a little blink of it. Also, there's a bit of etchiness in it, which I wasn't expecting. I wasn't expecting one of the fighters, all of a sudden her underwear is just constantly showing here and there, and that took me a little step back too, as there's not a whole lot of that in the entire manga, except for all of a sudden with this one character. It felt like they just threw that in. It is in color, which is nice, but one thing I thought was a little different, yes, it's cheaper than the normal webtoon, but if you see the size here, it's actually very similar to a Shonen Jump release. So I put this side-by-side comparison. I'm actually surprised that this was much smaller than I was anticipating, where a normal webtoon story, put one here, this is what I'm used to. I actually thought it was going to be something like this. Doombreaker is another one, Everything is Fine. There's so many other webtoons that were a lot bigger, so I was surprised that we got this size, especially for an MSRP of $19 for the US. So I don't know. I think I'll probably get the second volume because I hope it gets better, but again, I was surprised just how popular the series is, and yet it just left me wanting more. As you're following these characters, they're in this tournament, there's some secret group that they might be able to join, and yet I don't know why I'd want to join it. I don't know why I still want to follow this, other than I'm curious, how strong is this main character, and then these side characters, their inner strength, to see what happens. So with that, I'm feeling kind of mid or kind of lukewarm when it comes to The God of High School. Let's go ahead and dive into another one. Now, this next one I'm going to show with you is a one-shot that just, it gave me Goodnight Punpun vibes. If you're looking for something that has some good artwork, has a bit of a dark story, and as you follow the characters, you just think it can't get any worse, and yet it does. And that is, I want to say it's Takopi's Original Sin. I'm just say Original Sin so I don't butcher it, but this is a one-shot that just came out by Viz, and I will say it's definitely not for kids. It has the parental evasion explicit content on there, but this was it was a good one-shot. I enjoyed the story, and this follows this main character here, where an alien life form comes and his name is Happy. And this Happy life form, he comes from the planet of Happy, and his job is to help make other people happy himself with some different gadgets. And he discovers along the way that it's a lot harder just to make someone happy. And as you follow him as he tries over and over again, and you see the different perspectives, that it's not that easy to make somebody happy, especially when they're under some terrible circumstances. And again, just when you think circumstances can't get worse, when they peel another layer off the character development, you're just like, oh dang, it is worse. And it sank my heart a bit. I did appreciate the ending. I'm not going to spoil it because it's a first impression, but I actually appreciated the ending they gave on just the overall theme on the answer to this situation. Is sometimes there's manga that's just feels like it's dark for the sake of being dark and sad, and there is no relief at the end. Now, Goodnight Punpun, I thought at the end of it does have a moral of the story and something that I took from it, and this manga, I think you can take something from it too. So if you're looking for a good one-shot, you're looking for some good artwork, and you want some of that Goodnight Punpun vibes, this is a story I would recommend checking out. Next is a interesting historical fiction story about an executioner taking place right before the French Revolution. And what's really interesting about this story is that I went on Wikipedia and I found out this person we learn in the story was a real character. And then when you learn about this person's family, their history, their father, they're all in this story as well. The artwork was very, very good. It reminded me of Midnight Children, and that is because it's by the same author, and that is Innocent. Now, one of the main reasons why I picked this up was I'm hoping that The Climber will come in English. I heard it's just amazing. It's in some people's top 10s of all time. So because of that, I wanted to support the author and hoping that if people see, if we pick up Innocent, if we pick up Midnight Children, that someone will be like, hey, we gotta bring The Climber over. So this series, I do want to forewarn, it is definitely not for kids. When I got this volume, I was actually surprised it was completely sealed, even had a, I believe, an 18+ sticker on it. This is not for kids whatsoever. It's a very, very heavy adult content and themes as you're following the son of an executioner who doesn't at first want to be an executioner, and he's kind of forced into this and does not want to have that choice. So because of that, he's now having to go along his own path while still doing something that he doesn't quite want to become or do, and has to find his own sense of justice. I thought the artwork was very good and stunning. Again, it's very graphic as you're seeing people beheaded. There's other heavy adult themes in it, but so it was a very good first volume. I was very intrigued by it, and it's a story that I think I'm going to continue on at least with another volume. I know some other people, they do really like The Innocent, and there is a sequel to this as well. And it's not a whole long story, so I appreciate this omnibus form here to see what Dark Horse is going to do with it. So with that, it's one that I would probably recommend if you're looking for those type of heavier themes. If you were looking for a historical fiction story, sort of like Vinland Saga, but a lot different, as there's not really any magic to this, but again, you're following the footsteps of what it was like if you had to be the executioner in the French Revolution. I learned some things that I didn't realize took a toll, or just behind the scenes of what took place to be essentially this king position, this royalty position, kind of like a cupbearer or the royal baker. There was also a royal executioner. I never really thought of that before, of what must it be like for that person who's an executioner? What is the pain, the anguish they may have to go through as a person who has to carry the weight of that job? So because of that, I was very intrigued to go ahead and continue. All right, next one is a story that I actually really enjoyed. And as soon as I was done reading, my son who's 11, I said, you got to check out the story. I think you're gonna absolutely love it. It's funny, in Skyrim, one of his favorite jobs is being a blacksmith. So I just thought this would be totally up his alley, and that is Overgeared. This is by Eyes Press. It's full in color. I would say if you like solo leveling, you are going to love Overgeared, as it has a lot of those other themes. This takes place where there's this video game world where over 2 billion people play, and the main character, his life isn't so good outside of it. Reminds me a little bit like Ready Player One, but without the pop culture. But this is a really good first volume. I immediately wanted to go ahead and order the second volume, and I'm so intrigued for this. I actually loved it. The little pop-ups that come up when you level up, as he's navigating different NPCs. This character who's not seen as much as anything, and all of a sudden, due to some luck, he's now has this special ability to be one of the best blacksmiths of all time in this game. And what could that mean just to change his life, as his life on the outside just is not that good. So I'm intrigued by it. I absolutely loved it. My 11-year-old son loved the story as well. It's one that I'm probably going to rave so much about in my haul video, but this is one I absolutely enjoyed. It may even make my top 10 for the year of best new manga. highly recommend checking out Overgeared. Speaking of Eye of the Suppressed, I got another volume 1 that I was actually very surprised how much I enjoyed this story, and I immediately gave it to my 12-year-old daughter. She loved it as well. In fact, she ended up reading it back to back, and I was actually surprised. I'm like, you're reading it again? She's like, yes, I absolutely loved it. And that is The Villainess Turns the Hourglass. Now, this is about this girl who isn't that great of a person, is a bit of a villain herself, and in the very beginning, you discover that there is actually a greater villain, a villain that led her to being a villain herself and never being a good person. And she is able to somehow, at the very beginning, she gets executed and then wakes up almost as if the hourglass has turned, and it's now, I think, 10 or 13 years in the past. And now she is young again, and she has opened her eyes now that she knows that there is a true worse villain than her that was manipulating and mastering everything behind the scenes, and now she's going to get her revenge. And so you're seeing this gal who you hope maybe will turn the corner, maybe she'll be a good person, but instead you're seeing her become really that true villain, as you're seeing a master behind the master of the puppets. So the person who's in the shadows, lurking in the shadows, moving all these chess pieces, you now see her behind that person manipulating the chess pieces and actually making moves faster than her, just because she now has that knowledge. So this was so really good. This might also make my top 10 of new releases for the year. I was so blown away by this. My daughter really liked it. If you're looking for a different twist on the villain type of story here, as you're looking at a person who they're becoming the villain of the villain, it's something I don't see too often. So I was very thoroughly impressed with this. If it's with other Eyes releases, it's all in color. This was a great first impression. I'm so excited continuing the series. Next manga series I picked up, that the only reason why I think we actually got a physical release is because the anime did so well. Now this series gives me vibes of Komi Can't Communicate, as it has to deal with a person who has a large social disorder, and that is Boochi The Rock. Now, Boochi The Rock, this was a great first volume. It had many laugh out loud moments, and I do want to spare you here. It is thin, but it's a deceiving thin. Even though it's only 120 or 30 pages, the story's actually read differently and the normal manga here, as you're following these 4 panels and you're going all the way down in each one. So there was actually a lot of dialogue, and for only 120 or 130 pages, this actually took me a lot longer to read than it would be one Komi Can't Communicate volume. There was many laugh out loud moments, and there's some cozy vibes with this story as you follow this girl who, from social anxiety, just didn't have any friends, so instead she ended up just learning how to play the guitar. And for playing the guitar for 6 hours a day, every day, she's gotten really well with it. And her dream in life is to have friends and someday actually play on a stage. So you're seeing her as she's navigating this band and coming up together and trying to somehow overcome her social anxiety. And it's just such a fun story. It's very wholesome. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I believe there's only 6 volumes in Japan, so I believe we're going to get all 6 fairly quickly in America. And because there's only 6 volumes, and yes, again, it is a little more thin, again, don't let that deceive you, because there is a ton of content in this type of volume. Next is a series that is actually a little more thin than I would have liked. It's almost, you could say, on thin ice. If you get my pun, you would know what I'm talking about, and that is the Ice Guy and the Cool Girl. Now, I will say with this, it reminded me as well as Komi Can't Communicate. It's wholesome, it's funny, as you're following this guy who has an ice or a snow spirit. So because he's born of a snow spirit, anytime that he gets excited, snow appears, and it's this adult rom-com office setting, and this girl here, she kind of thinks he's pretty cute, and anytime he's like, ooh, do you really like me? All of a sudden you can tell, because snow starts gathering all around him. Yeah, it's cute that he can make these little snowmen, and then they can talk back to him. So it was a good first volume. I could see this becoming a very popular series with other people. But my biggest complaint is not only did it read really fast, unlike Boochi that had a ton of dialogue, this one didn't have as much dialogue as you see in the panels here. And again, this was a super, super small volume. So for an MSRP of $14.99, I didn't necessarily feel like I was getting my bang for my buck with this. Now, I did appreciate the size of it, and again, the artwork is absolutely stunning. It is funny, it is wholesome, and my daughter really did enjoy this volume more than I did. But this one I'm actually not sure if I want to continue, at least at this price. I just didn't feel that was worth it, and yes, it had those funny laugh out loud moments, but there just wasn't as many as I get from like a Call Me Can't Communicate or from Boochi The Rock. Now, that series, I had many moments that I was laughing. Now, this one, I was like, ha, it had moments here and there, so it was okay. So for the time being, unless there's some super like cool winter sale, I'm actually gonna hold pause and kind of chill out before I go ahead and I continue this one. Next series I'm going to share is actually a reprint of a series that has been out of print for quite a while, and Yen Press decided to give a premium edition of this series. It's actually a prequel to a better known series called X by Clamp, and that is Tokyo Babylon. Now this is a little bit more on the thin side where it's only 140 volumes. I hope that's not a trend that we're going to see continuing in manga where we're just going to not only are we going to raise the price, but we're going to give you less bang for your buck. But for this series, there's only 7 volumes, so it didn't feel too bad. And it gave this full poster here, which I thought was kind of cool. I'm never going to tear that out or anything, but I really appreciated that. And it does feel nice in your hands. I thought they did a really good job. I like the red on the cover here. Now, this series, you're following this main character and his twin sister, and they're the spiritual exorcist, and they're going around the city finding different things that are possessed and then freeing those spirits or those ghosts. So it was a very good first volume. It's definitely a lot more on the old school, the artwork here, but I'm intrigued enough that for the first time here, I've never read this. I'm intrigued enough to continue on. And again, because it's only 7 volumes, I know I can get it on a better sale than I wouldn't pay $15 for one of these volumes. But I know I can find it probably for about $9 or less. I'm willing to pay that for this. So because of that, I'm going to go ahead and continue this series. If that intrigues you at all, if you're looking for more of an old school story, this is one you might want to check out. Now this next series, First Impressions, is a series I absolutely love the first volume. I felt like I read it almost too fast, and then I immediately looked online. I'm like, when's the next volume coming out? And then I saw it's like 5 or 6 months. I'm like, oh no! So I might check it out on Webtoons. But that is UnOrdinary, and this was such a good first volume. As you're following these high schoolers here, remind me a little bit like My Hero Academia, but it's not. Is this main character? He's at the school and he's ranked a 0. This girl, I think she's ranked like a level 7, and I believe it goes up to like level 10 or so of having these abilities, and kids will fight each other, and they're trying to going through school, and yet they have these superpowers. So it was really interesting as you're following this main character who does not have any superpowers himself, doesn't have any abilities, and is constantly being beat up. The nurse is constantly having to heal him, and you're following him as he's trying to navigate through life. And there's this idea with the story which I really appreciate, is that can we be equal? Just because you have all these strong powers, should we have equal rights? And there's this idea in this story that's not like My Hero Academia, is that there isn't necessarily heroes in this story. And a question comes up is, what would it be like to be a hero? What would it be like to use your power for good instead of just dominance, being on top of the food chain just because you're so strong? And there's this unrest coming from society where these 0 people who don't have any abilities are kind of speaking up, and they're wanting to be in power even though they actually don't literally have any abilities. So very, very intriguing first volume. Had a bit of a cliffhanger at the end of the bit, and I was just, wow, blown away, full in color. Highly recommend checking this one out. Now the last series I'm going to share with you is another webtoon series, and this is actually about a vampire. Now this vampire has been asleep for 700 years and is now awakened, and you know, society is just a little different than it was back then, as vampires aren't necessarily roaming the lands and in control, and then maybe humans have risen above, but that is Noblesse. Now, I will say one thing that was a bit of a bummer with this is that there is a lot of dead space in the paneling, as you see here. That bothered me. I wish it was completely full, but that's okay. It reminded me more of a lot of American comics, Some of them will have a lot more dead space in it, so I wasn't prepared for that, but I was a bit intrigued by the story. Here's the main character who looks like he has a bunch of makeup on for a vampire, but maybe that's just more natural. And then you're following him as now he decides to go ahead and join and be a high schooler to kind of understand and learn the world around him. And there is some funny scenes as you're seeing him go through life, what it's like with other people that are in high school. Maybe they force him to play some video games. Maybe they feed him some food that has garlic in it. He wonders if they're trying to kill him. So there were some very interesting elements with that, and the ending did have a bit of a hook. Now the story started off a bit slow and I was kind of bored a little bit, but then it did ramp up towards the end and I was very intrigued for the second volume. I didn't feel the need to immediately want to go ahead and pick up the second volume. I'm sure it's gonna be a while before we get volume 2 anyways, but I will pick it up because I do want to continue this story. So I guess I'm a bit lukewarm on this. I'm not on fire like with UnOrdinary, but I am intrigued to find out what happens next, as you do see a little bit more of the main character. He just has no personality as of now. He's just kind of there. And I hope there's more intrigue behind that and we get to see more of his personality later on. And again, there was some lightheartedness with it, so it wasn't just heavy this whole time. All right, those are 10 brand new first volume impressions. Again, some of these series have just come out within the last couple weeks. I hope this could be helpful to you as you discover some new series throughout this holiday season. If you'd like to see more content like this and you've not done so already, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe to the channel. That helps others know about this community that we have built together. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.